A pirate adventure to rival any ever seen on screen. A production and budget gone completely out of control. And a struggling film studio that went from being on top of the world to out of business in just 4 years. To me, box office bombs are some of the most interesting moments in film history. It's not a matter of having fun at the expense of creators, but a fascination in how the hopes of a studio and a team behind a film can be completely out of step with what audiences want. And in the aftermath, a truly giant bomb can alter the course of not just the people involved, but the film industry as a whole. 30 years ago, the biggest box office bomb in movie history was released. But while it was infamous at the time, it's essentially been forgotten in favor of films that both did its central premise better and other movies that lost much more money. The film in question, Cutthroat Island, a massive pirate adventure that bankrupted its studio, Carolco Pictures, before it was even released, and cleared the way for Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean almost a decade later to succeed in almost every way this film failed. So what went wrong with this gigantic pirate film that was meant to take over the world? How was this thing essentially doomed from the start? And what is the actual legacy of one of the biggest flops on film? This is the story of Cutthroat Island, the pirate disaster that sunk a studio. The pirate movie has been around basically as long as the medium itself, with films in the 1910s jumping on the popularity of Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island with adaptations, as well as other later hits like the fantastic Captain Blood, all making the pirate film one of Hollywood's first big adventure genres. However, the 1960s were probably the last big decade for the pirate movie, reflecting a time of widescreen Hollywood adventure before the auteur-driven artistic films that dominated the 1970s, and a decade of sci-fi, horror, and grounded drama in the 1980s rendered high seas swashbuckling out of step with the times. All to say, pirate films were far from a guaranteed box office draw by the 90s. Still, the idea of a 4-quadrant blockbuster in a time where big movies were making more money than ever was irresistible to the studio that would make, and soon be destroyed by, Cutthroat Island. Carolco Pictures, an independent American studio founded in 1976 by Mario Casar and Andrew G. Vania, Carolco found real success in the 80s with a distribution deal in conjunction with TriStar Pictures, and a series of action films that, if you're anything like me, has made Carolco one of those logos you know from first sight but probably know very little about. Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger in particular were the stars Carolco hitched their wagon to, with the first 3 Rambos, Red Heat, Total Recall, and Basic Instinct being some of their biggest films. Eventually, Carolco struck it big with Terminator 2 in 1991, which wound up making a massive $520 million that year, becoming the 3rd highest grossing film ever at the time. However, Carolco's spending was out of control, with the studio still posting a $91 million loss that same year because of the amount of money they spent on scripts, star contracts, and bonuses, like a $17 million jet for Arnie. Cue a string of flops, and the studio striking a deal that saw it barely make any money from the hit Cliffhanger, and suddenly Carolco was in financial dire straits just a couple years after making one of the most successful movies in film history. And it was at this moment in 1994 that Carolco found themselves at a crossroads. Either produce a new film from Paul Verhoeven, who had made Recall and Instinct for the studio, called Crusade, a historical epic starring Schwarzenegger, or a pirate movie called Cutthroat Island. And, well, you already know which one they pick, with Verhoeven insulted by Carolco's budgetary restrictions and walking out on the studio, with Carolco still losing out on $13 million paid to Crusade's pre-production and Schwarzenegger's contract. Given that Carolco essentially had no money to make the film, its executives quickly drummed up $50 million in financing by pre-selling its advanced rights to overseas distributors in Europe and Japan, promising the film would be a big fat hit for everyone involved. So what exactly led to Cutthroat Island being the film that Carolco staked its future on? At the start of the 90s, writers James Gorman and Michael Frost Beckner were under a development deal with Disney, with the pair giving the studio first look at any scripts they made. That led to Gorman and Beckner writing the initial draft of what would become Cutthroat Island, and even pitching it to Disney CEO Michael Eisner as a Pirates of the Caribbean movie, only for it to be rejected. With the script freed from the first look deal, Carolco optioned it in 1990, paying the duo $1.7 million for the rights. It was right around this time when director Renny Harlin made Cliffhanger for the studio, and, coming off other hits like Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and Die Hard 2, Carolco gave him carte blanche with their adventure film. Meanwhile, Harlin married actress Geena Davis, and with Davis in pursuit of a big blockbuster film to lead, they came as a package deal for Cutthroat. At the same time, Carolco was losing money and essentially had to be kited from big tentpole hit to big tentpole hit each year to stay in business. Basic Instinct kept them alive in 1992, Cliffhanger in 1993, and Stargate in 1994. But 1995 was looking dire, and so, no matter what happened, Cutthroat Island had to debut that year. So while filming was meant to begin in January 1994, script rewrites and changing demands from Harlin and Davis continued to push the start date back by months, over and over and over. Many in the industry saw Cutthroat Island as a vanity project by the duo, and a multi-million-dollar wedding gift. Harlin, on the other hand, speaks differently, saying, "We begged to be let go. Geena was scared mindless about headlining this film. We felt that a pirate movie with a female lead was suicidal, but we were contractually obligated. And we were so concerned about the script at that point that I personally spent $1 million of my own money to hire Mark Norman." The finalized story is the product of many different rewrites, with it eventually credited as screenplay by Robert King and Mark Norman, and a story by Michael Frost Beckner, James Gorman, Bruce A. Evans, and Reynold Gideon. That's a lot of people for a movie that plays like a cut and paste of every pirate trope there is. Anyway, the film. The film follows Morgan Adams, played by Geena Davis, an infamous and lifelong pirate in search of a hidden treasure and revenge on her pirate uncle, Dog Brown, Frank Langella, who murdered her father, also a pirate. Her search leads her to buying thief William Shaw, Matthew Modine, as her slave, to use his skills in Latin to decode the pirate treasure map, that just so happened to be tattooed on the back of her dead pirate dad's scalp, which she chops off. And so our adventure takes us to the hidden Cutthroat Island, a pirate wonderland of adventure, mystery, betrayal, and more pirates. Wow, okay, so I'm saying pirate a lot here, just like everyone's a pirate. Even the governors, the authors, and the pigeons are pirates too. With a film this big, Carolco needed stars to attract audiences and initially hired Michael Douglas for the role of William Shaw, with Davis already locked in as part of the deal with Harlin as director. However, continued disagreements and Davis essentially having as much control over the film as Harlin led to Douglas quitting and leaving the film without a famous male lead. The search for a replacement led to Keanu Reeves, Ralph Fiennes, Tom Cruise, Jeff Bridges, Liam Neeson, and many more being offered the parts, who all turned it down until the studio chose Matthew Modine. Now, no disrespect to Modine, but he's not exactly a name you'd place on the same level as those other actors. His most famous role is probably still from Full Metal Jacket as the lead, but in the decade after, he mostly had small roles in bigger films, or was the lead in small movies. Suddenly, he's the male star in a gigantic adventure, and doing his best to be Errol Flynn, and just sorta coming up as an imitation. Oliver Reed, professional drinker and part-time actor, was also cast in a supporting role, but was fired from the film when he got into a bar fight and tried to whip out his dick in front of Davis. He would later go on to have a great part in Gladiator, where he died from drinking mid-shoot. Oh, Oliver, you rascal. When Carolco greenlit the picture, Cutthroat Island was budgeted at $60 million, but the costs quickly got away from the studio as its executives let the film run rampant. Massive sets were built in Malta while Harlin was working on other projects, only for the director to demand they all be changed when he arrived. Producer David Nichols and art director Wolf Kroger quit at the start of production after non-stop fights with Harlin. Chief camera operator Nicola Pecorini was fired before filming began, causing dozens of crew members to walk out in protest. Harlin flew in crew members, stuntmen, and horses from all around the world to their sets in Thailand and Malta, with more than 2,000 costumes, 309 guns, 620 swords, 250 daggers, and 100 axes, all custom-made for the cast. To stage the film's climactic ship battle, 2 full-size replicas of 17th century ships with 20 cannons on each side were built and placed in a special giant hydraulic wave machine tank of water, costing more than $1 million to make. A memo sent from Harlin to the crew, which was leaked to the press, said, Our imagination and sense of invention cannot be limited by mundane reality. I don't want it big. I want huge. I don't want fast. I want explosive. I don't want accidents. I want disasters. The production itself was a struggle. Filming any movie on water is essentially a nightmare for even a great film crew, because the environment becomes uncontrollable and unpredictable. Things break, nothing works right, constant delays increase costs. And then the accidents started happening. One of the ships caught fire and was nearly burned down, shutting down production for 3 days until filming could resume, and eventually blow it up on camera on purpose. Cinematographer Oliver Wood fell off a crane into one of the tanks in the first week of filming, breaking his leg and needing to be replaced by Peter Levy. Both Davis and Modine were injured repeatedly while doing their own stunts. The waters were polluted and the food was bad, leaving countless cast and crew sick with food poisoning throughout filming. By the end, the cost of producing, financing, marketing, and distributing Cutthroat Island totaled $121 million. Nowhere near their $60 million budget. Adjusted for inflation, that's $253 million in 2025. But Carolco could simply not stop spending money, and they had to finish the film in the hopes of making a profit and staying alive. We knew from that point if we lost Cutthroat Island as well, bankruptcy would be inevitable, said a Carolco executive. If we made the film, there was at least some chance we could survive. Geena Davis, on the other hand, had a different outlook, saying, "They had to make this movie. The company was dead. Everybody knew that, one way or another, this was their last movie." And go bankrupt they did, with Carolco filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 6 weeks before Cutthroat Island came out, with only the hopes of a big hit to save them. With all this talk of mounting budgets, a production gone wrong, and creators burning through cash that doesn't exist, as well as the looming specter of this being a studio-killing disaster, I think it's important to remember that financial performance does not equate to quality of movie. Plenty of great films lose money. Plenty of shitty films make bank. The financial success of a film is often the result of good marketing, positive reception, and simply being in the right place at the right time. So with all that to say, how is Cutthroat Island? Well, it's not very good. The best thing you can say about the picture is that you can really see all that money they spent up on the screen. From start to finish, Cutthroat Island plays across massive sets, has huge action sequences filled with explosions, stunts, and complex shots, and sells that it's a massive journey with everything from authentic pirate ships to deserted islands playing host to a lengthy adventure. But the story is completely forgettable. This is really just the hunt for buried treasure made more complicated by double crosses and a lot of different locations. But it's mostly just an excuse to jam every preconceived pirate-related scene into the film, all accompanied by composer John Debney's score, which is well done and screams pirate movie, but doesn't last in your mind. Is there a giant storm on the ocean? Yes. Do 2 ships engage in cannon fire? You betcha. Do our heroes bravely jump off a cliff? Yeah, in the worst effect of maybe the entire decade. Sword duels? Constantly. A carriage chase? Obviously. Quicksand? Do you even need to ask? But to be honest, I couldn't tell you why we get to each of these moments despite rewatching, yes, I've seen this movie before, Cutthroat Island right before writing this script, because this movie is simply evaporated from my brain. Even worse are the characters and the actors chosen for many of them. Who is Morgan Adams besides Lady Pirate? Who is William Shaw beyond Roguish Thief? And while I like Geena Davis in plenty of roles, she does not for one second convince me that she is a lifelong pirate from the 1600s. And Matthew Modine is quite clearly trying to be Carrie Elwes in The Princess Bride and coming up very short. Their romance, from a very ill-advised, unanesthetized bullet removal surgery turned sexy time somehow, to a last-minute sinking ship rescue with Modine in peril and Davis as the rescuer, makes about as many sparks fly as your old sad mom and dad on a Saturday night away from you kids. Ooh, apply cold water to that burn, viewer. Frank Langella as the villainous dog is a little more fun simply because the actor is allowed to chew the scenery, but I get some real dress-up vibes from him too. Plus, these characters have no arcs. They're exactly the same at beginning and end, just richer. So no, Cutthroat Island isn't some hidden gem waiting for a new generation to discover it. If you ever see a YouTube video that says something like, "The forgotten gem that's better than Pirates of the Caribbean," those people are lying to you for views. It's not so bad it's good. It's not a misunderstood masterpiece. It's a subpar but very expensive pirate adventure that has been done better in many other movies. Yes, most of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies are better than this, but not all of them. Pirates retrospective coming soon. But I'd also recommend Captain Blood for anyone in the mood for classic swashbuckling. Because, for as many buckles as this movie tries to swash, Cutthroat misses in most cases. So, like I said, this movie is one of the bombs to end all bombs. And in the end, Cutthroat Island ended up making a total of $18.5 million at the box office for a total loss of $105 million. The biggest financial loss in film history when accounting for the cost of marketing and the share paid to movie theaters. That's about $217 million when adjusted for inflation. And even with Carolco getting so much money from pre-production distribution deals, the loss only compounded the studio's money woes, leading to them selling their library to Studio Canal in 1996 to cover their losses and be officially dead. It wasn't a quiet failure either. When Cutthroat Island opened on December 22, 1995, it opened in 11th place. 11th! Coming in behind things like Toy Story in its 5th week, and new releases like Waiting to Exhale, Grumpier Old Men, and Dracula Dead and Loving It. There would be no long money-making run for the film to make up for its bad opening. This was a disaster.
Bad dog.
And after 2 weeks, Cutthroat Island was gone from theaters. Carolco's closure also meant that it was no longer involved in 2 upcoming films they had plans to finance: Independence Day in 1996 and Titanic in 1997, 2 juggernaut hits that would have likely made the studio one of the most successful in the decade. Instead, Carolco was gone forever, and the pirate movie, once a mainstay of big-budget Hollywood adventure, was seen as a doomed genre. For the rest of the 90s and into the early 2000s, there weren't really any notable pirate movies beyond Muppets Treasure Island, a lesser Muppet movie, I said it, and Treasure Planet, which also lost money at the box office. But I would argue that this cleared the deck for Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl in 2003. Also predicted to be a bomb with a huge budget, Pirates went on to make $654 million. That's roughly 35.3 Cutthroat Islands. Why the difference? Well, it's not like Cutthroat and Pirates are all that different in plot. Buried treasure, a vengeful crew, and a central romance. But then again, there's only so many things that a pirate film does in general. But it's the combination of pirates having a recognizable idea from the theme park ride, a fun supernatural element to distinguish it, a really unique performance by Johnny Depp that adds a ton to the movie, and just all around being a much better film coming along at the right time that made it a massive hit. The pirate movie has never really recovered from Cutthroat Island, but that's made Disney's Pirates into the de facto face of the genre, while Harlin's movie remains a cautionary tale. So what happened to the major players involved in Cutthroat Island? Well, being part of one of the biggest box office bombs in history isn't good for your career. Harlin's filmography is a very strange one, but he's never lacked for work, with his next film, The Long Kiss Goodnight, also starring Davis, coming out the next year and doing much better than Cutthroat. After that, it's the strange blend of Deep Blue Sea, Driven, and Exorcist: The Beginning. But from then on, it's been a lot of low-budget features, culminating in the still ongoing and very ill-advised The Strangers Chapters 1, 2, and 3. As for Davis, she and Harlin were divorced in 1998, shortly after the release of Long Kiss Goodnight, and Harlin fathering a child with Davis's personal assistant. Yeah, that'll do it. And honestly, Davis hasn't done much on film since, besides the Stuart Little movies and Making Me Weep Bitterly as a Voice and When Marnie Was There, citing Hollywood's age discrimination against women over 40, but with quite a few different TV shows over the years and nothing like Cutthroat Island ever again. Modine kinda just carried on with his career in small roles like he had before, instead of being catapulted to leading man like what probably would have happened if Cutthroat had succeeded. His biggest role in the years since is probably in Stranger Things, where he plays vaguely threatening scientist man. Regarding Cutthroat, Modine would later state that Harlin was only interested in directing Davis, saying, "It's the first movie I've worked on where the director never really spoke to me. It was frustrating, and Renny spent a lot of his time just finding new ways to blow things up. He likes to blow things up." And in 2015, film producer Alexander Bafer tried to resurrect the Carolco brand after buying the name and logo, only for Studio Canal to shut the venture down over its legal ownership. In the 30 years since Cutthroat Island destroyed a studio, its legacy has largely been its loss and not much else. And yet, it no longer stands as the biggest bomb in film history, being passed up by The 13th Warrior in 1999, John Carter in 2012, The Lone Ranger in 2013, Mortal Engines in 2018, and The Marvels in 2023. All movies with out-of-control budgets and studios banking on audiences that simply weren't interested in what they were selling. The funny thing is that very few of these films had the impact on the industry that Cutthroat Island did, because there was, for a moment, a time when outrageous stories of productions gone mad and budgets that spiraled out of control became a lesson to learn from, instead of a scary story that no one thought would happen to them. Thanks for watching today's video, and something a little bit different. I know that I've focused mainly on horror movies lately, but box office bombs are also sort of a sick fascination of mine. And when it comes to box office disasters, Cutthroat Island was synonymous with the idea for a long time. Like I mentioned in the video, there have been a lot of other movies in the years since that have lost more money, embarrassingly, but Cutthroat Island is such a fascinating disaster to me, especially in the light of it being Pirates of the Caribbean just a few years before Pirates of the Caribbean. With the production gone wrong, all that money spent, and a studio destroyed, I just really wanted to talk about it and investigate how this came about. And really it seems the way that Cutthroat went wrong was the case of a studio being in too deep and not being able to get itself out. Carolco essentially was doomed from the time they started making this movie. Pirate movies in general to me are just super fun, and while I don't think that Cutthroat is a very good movie and not a very good pirate movie, it's still entertaining enough. This is the type of movie that you put on in the background in a Saturday afternoon while you're doing a few other things, and look up every so often to see a sword fight or an explosion. And it's really not much more than that. But if that's what you're looking for, you can definitely find it there. As I mentioned in the video, I'm planning on doing a Pirates of the Caribbean retrospective as well, and I think that digging into that franchise will be very interesting, especially as there is continued talks of making another one after all these years. And I'd love to continue doing more box office disasters and picking apart what went wrong and how it impacted the film industry in the aftermath. If there's any box office bombs in particular that you'd like for me to cover, let me know. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons and members for their continued support, and if you'd like to be a patron or member, it's only $2 a month for early access to every video and exclusive reviews. So until next time, I hope that you're taking care of yourselves and thinking about where you invest your money.